Reginald here. I thought it might be a little fun to go through some of the stuff that's been going on in Next Fest and just provide some product feedback on some of the things I tried out and what caught my attention about those things and why I tried them. See, the way I figure it, plenty of people do video game reviews and talk to the possible client on whether or not they should buy a game, but how many people talk to the developers about what they liked or didn't like about the game and what maybe would improve the game from the current state it's in to some future state? So I thought it would be cool to go through these products that I picked out and just talk about what worked and what didn't and what should maybe be improved to get a better product out of the deal. Now, for those of you who haven't seen much of anything on my channel and found this video by accident, I actually work as a product manager, and what that means is I essentially do this kind of thing for a living. Now, this is not going to be an in-depth product analysis. I'm not going to be doing any KPIs for this kind of product review. What I'm going to be talking about more is impressions and elements for improvement, things that are relatively small or relatively big, and what kind of priority those might have for a developer to fix before launching their product. With that said, I also want to just leave a caveat as we go forwards. While I am a product manager and I do this for a living, it's not necessarily the case that all of my ideas are fundamentally good just because I say them, or that because I've made a suggestion, it has to be implemented. So there are always trade-offs in making these kinds of decisions. My goal is to provide useful information for the relevant parties who actually know their product and their vision for the product to make decisions about what they need to do. I've mentioned this before. It's important to kill your darlings, but it's not good to kill your dream. So whatever your vision is, if I'm conflicting with that vision in my recommendations, then you should throw out my suggestions. Your vision is important, but make sure you're not mixing up your vision for your darlings. That's a common problem when building something complicated, is that you think an idea is core to your vision and actually it's in the way of your vision. So just kind of keep an eye out for those elements as we go forwards. All right, I think that's enough. So let's hop into it. So, Goobies then. Now, what drew me into Goobies was actually the art style. It looks to be very much a sort of vampire survivors type game, a reverse shmups, I've heard it called. And this is a genre that seems to be very popular in Next Fest. There's a whole bunch of copycat games and stuff like that. And I have no objection to copycats if they're competent. This game is a little bit different in that they're choosing a different art style to try and bring some visual flavor to the experience. And that's interesting to me. And also, it looked kind of silly and fun. As it happens, I actually really like playing Tab G, and there's a little bit of that flavor here, at least on the splash screen when you look at, or the splash advertisement when you look at that, and I'll post that up here. I just kind of liked the idea of playing a flaily-armed idiot running away from a bunch of gloopy monsters, hoping to crush me with their blobbiness, as I played something akin to Vampire Survivors in what I assumed would be the gameplay based on the trailer. Now, that proved to be true, at least, and I did enjoy Vampire Survivors, especially while waiting around for something to ever show up on the Dark Tide mission board, at least at the difficulty level I like to play at. And as a consequence, I played quite a bit of Vampire Survivors waiting around for something to show up for Dark Tide. So, hey, if there's something else out there, it might be fun to play a game like that. I also wait around for other things. Something simple but fun you can kind of come and go from. That and a cute art style that has a little bit of pizzazz to it, little stylistic elements to it. That's cool. And so that was what attracted me to Goobies. This then is kind of my first point of negative feedback on the product. I think the art style is pretty decent, and it definitely captures the essence of what it's going for, but the focus on a perfectly top-down camera here, I think harms the character of the game. You might want to tilt the camera, or look at tilting the camera, about 15 degrees, give or take. I mean, don't quote me on that number, but it's just my gut says something like that would be about right. Enough so that you can get a little bit of a face-on view, at least more so, of the enemies, because the enemies are kind of cute and fun, and you've done some work to design them, but I can't really see them very well from this top-down view. There's some style here that's lost from being so focused on the top-down. Maybe I've got this wrong, but that was my gut instinct when looking at this. But that leads right into my other piece of feedback, which is the characters you've added here are kind of neat, and I kind of look forward to unlocking some of them. But I also am not sure that I am in love with this notion that I'm going to start off as this sort of super bland wiggly ball. I mean, the wiggly ball is cute, but I almost feel like I want to unlock that towards the end of my gameplay experience, where I care a little bit less about how it looks, a little bit more about the mechanics. And I would rather play Wiggly Arm Man earlier when the game is newer to me and I'm trying to get hooked into the style and the aesthetics of the product first. I'm not saying you have to do that, obviously, but my thinking here is you're trying to hook the player initially, right? And one of your strongest elements, an element that you think is strong enough to put on your own store page's front cover, is the silly wiggly armed man running away from the enemies, right? So what you've done by burying him under an unlock later in the game is actually keep that away from the player at the time where you're trying to hook the player soonest. So it might behoove you to, I don't know, add a couple more characters or whatever, or just just rearrange the characters so that the more iconic characters are up front in your gameplay experience and the less iconic ones are out back. And you might have to add one or two more characters to create some more variety visually towards the end, so there's something fun to work towards from a visual perspective. But the mechanical elements of the game are what's going to drive the player onwards after they've played the game for a bit anyway, not the visual elements quite as much. I mean, Vampire Survivors had not that fabulous of visuals, but it had a certain style to it that was aesthetically pleasing, and so sometimes you'd unlock a character that just kind of looked cool and you enjoyed that. And the same is true in your game. So I don't want to downplay the aesthetics, but I also don't want to what I want to do is say maybe the focus on aesthetics should be more upfront, because that's when the player's going to have the least attachment to the mechanics of your game, which do appear to be good to me, and I'll get to that in a second. I think the mechanics of the game appear strong. I know it's got simple visual effect, but it looks like you have thought out how to do some interesting combinatrix of your equipment. So, for example, there is a set of powers centered around losing health to do more damage, and I think that's cool. Things like that are fun. I liked the Wormies as a power. I just thought that was a really amusing one, and I liked the Ghost's power as well. That was also very amusing. So I think you've got stuff in here that's both clever and funny and kind of creative and cute. So it all works together very nicely to create a good gameplay experience. And I really liked the bosses. I thought having these big bosses with these health bars come in kind of gave a really fun little element that I wasn't quite expecting. You know, the bosses in Vampire Survivors were usually kind of these just bullet soaks, right? These had a little bit more of a boss fight feel to them, and I thought, you know, that was fun, right? Like, there was the only one that really jumps out of mind for me in Vampire Survivors is the crab. And like I have said, I haven't really beaten the whole thing yet, but the crab had like a real boss fighty kind of vibe, but it was still just you beat the claws to death or whatever. The Zigrid here had like these drops that he was like landing all around you, and like you had to do all this stuff to deal with it. At the same time, you're fighting other enemies. I thought that was great, so props. And while I'm here, I just want to mention that I think it's really great how the little character oozes into the trees. I think that looks nice, and it's a good little touch of detail that's satisfying to and enjoyable. I'd also like to just give a shout out to the menu design. I think the menu design is cute, and the sound effects are effective here, and it just looks good. The text is a little hard to read in places, but I don't know that it's bad enough to be worried about changing it, and it has a strong style to it, so I like that ultimately, and I think you'd get pretty used to it pretty quick, so I'm not sure that I would touch it, but just FYI. I need to touch on a negative here real quick as well as we go along. The music is unconscionably bad, and I'm sorry to say that. It's just very generic. It's not like... How do I say this properly? I don't want to be like insulting, but like it becomes grating extremely quickly. It has just sort of this very generic sounding, like light beat kind of thing. It sounds super plain, and you've got a couple options on this front, right? You can just make the music easy to turn off. Right, it's in the settings menu already, but you might take from mobile design and just give us a button that says turn off the music, right? And then players can just go get their own music somewhere and like listen to whatever they want while they're playing the game, and that's totally fine as well. The downside of this, of course, is you can't then leverage any music for any exciting events in your game if you have any. So that's kind of your call on that front on how you want to manage that. But another alternative would be to redo the music. I'm not sure you want to take on the burden of doing something like that so late in the game. Maybe that's an after release item, or maybe that's just hey, we're going to call that one a loss item. I don't think it's so bad that it's going to kill your game, but it might be worth adding at least a button that makes it easier to turn off the music, because it does really great pretty quickly. And so just understanding that a lot of players are going to want to turn it off and making that really accessible to them might be more than enough to make that problem go away from a like people run into it and review it kind of perspective, right? Here's a problem that does need addressing and probably is make or break for your game. See, with a game like this, there's a certain amount of the need to create a loop, something that grabs the player's attention and feels really cool, right? It feels good. It doesn't survive just on the mechanics. It's also got to survive on sort of the delivery of the mechanics. And one of those mechanics is the loot boxes in Vampire Survivors. So what you've done here is you've created this sort of wheel of fortune. And I don't hate the wheel, but I can't read the one from Zigrid. I have no idea what this is. It feels kind of like super confusing to look at. It's very, very bad to read. Now that I've paused it and I'm looking at it in close detail, like I have a better idea what's going on, but like even still, it doesn't feel very good. There's also no real audio cue for this. So I kill Zigrid and I get this Wheel of Fortune that just makes no sense. And then I think I kill Bakaraka or whatever a little bit later, and that one doesn't look any better. It's just like a bunch of squiggles to me. And maybe I'll understand that after a few hours of gameplay, but I'm not sure that I'm interested, because if you compare this to what Vampire Survivors did, right? Vampire Survivors, you get your first chest or whatever, and there's a bunch of cool music that makes it all exciting, and there's gems falling from the sky, and there's laser beams shooting out of it. Like, it's all designed to make Monkey Neuron activate, and this does not make Monkey Neuron activate. You know, I am not getting any dopamine from this thing. It's just kind of a random blob amongst a bunch of other random blobs. So I'm trying to tell you this is make or break in some senses, because I want to highlight the importance of this as part of your gameplay loop. It's up to you guys to decide whether or not that conflicts with your vision, right? But from my perspective, when I hit this thing, I was confused, not excited. It didn't do anything for me. And I think that's a problem that you need to solve. And I can't really give you tons of good ideas on how to solve it. You know, I don't know if you need to redesign it or what, but for sure you need some good music and sound effects that tell you what's happening from an emotional perspective. So that's where this is suffering the most, obviously, aside from this sort of convoluted visual design. And, you know, maybe you can do something on the visual design front in regards to bracketing it or making it easier to read, or I don't know. Good luck to you. That one sounds hard to me, and I don't have any good ideas off the top of my head. But the music, at least, could deliver some emotional energy to the moment, and I think that would be a lot stronger. And I'm gonna replay this section for you so you can actually hear what it sounds like when these things go off and how little there is going on. Okay, so the last thing I want to say here is I think the sound effects for the weaponry is really weak. And I think that's a problem on a number of dimensions. See, one of the things Vampire Survivors did as a detail was they made all of the weapons that you can get and the combinations of the evolved weapons sound very unique. So you can kind of hear them as they're all smashing together into things. But let's just take a second and listen to what it sounds like when I'm shooting a whole bunch of different effects that I've picked up on my second level of the run-through. So did you hear that? Me either. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on, and I can barely tell that anything's happening at all. And that was at full volume. If I turned it up, I still couldn't make out much. Just little doot noises that are here and there, and that's not good. Force feedback, even unrealistic force feedback, is really good in a video game. It activates those precious neurons. And, you know, I would reference Darktide for this. I would reference a lot of modern shooters for this. When you shoot someone in the head in a lot of shooter video games right now, you get this really satisfying crunchy effect of some kind that comes back to you to let you know you hit that target at the weak spot, and that just gets you going. This doesn't have really any effects for your stuff firing or impacting the target. Either would be good, and preferably a little of each, depending on the weapon type. For example, when my wormies spawn off of a successful hit, when I get that effect, because it's a percentage chance, I believe, from memory here, there's no sound effect to let me know that's happening. I just sort of eventually notice that these little yellow squigglies are running around. And like, that's satisfying to see them, but I want to hear them. I want to know that they happened when they happened. And so I would really try to find a way to translate that into your games through audio, through some sort of special effect or sound effect. I don't know exactly how to do that. That's not my domain of expertise. I'm just here to tell you what jumped out at me that I would do to improve the experience so that I can enjoy it more. And because I'd like to see your game succeed. I think there's something here. I think this will basically be my outro. I think there's something here in this game. It's pretty fun. And with the right price point and with just a little bit more polish, I think you actually have a product that's pretty good. At least from my perspective as a person who wants to play games like this occasionally. And I just don't think it hits beyond average right now. It feels very average, and it needs a little something extra to get it over the line. Some of that's in the sound domain, and I'm sure some of that's in the visual domain and in some of the gameplay domain. It's hard to say because I only had time to play your demo for a little bit, right? But I appreciated the time I did spend in your demo, and I was interested in playing it some more. So I'm looking forward to potentially picking it up, depending on the price point, and just spending a little time with it to get to know it a little. I think it's fun, and I can see the passion that went into the product, and I can see that you put time into thinking out the abilities and powers. So my hope is that you guys succeed. Good luck. For those of you who came to visit for this video, I really appreciate you hanging out. This was a bit of a different thing for me. But I do work like this on the regular. This is sort of like a product review. You might have some product come along as a product manager, and it could be an element of a product even, and someone wants to know, are they doing a good job or not, or what do they need to improve, right? It could be your developer on your team, or it could be a product manager from another team wants to ask you how things are going for them. They want a second set of eyes to go over the product. And so what I've tried to do here is do the same thing I would do for someone else, which is, hey, here's what I think worked, here's what I think didn't work, here's what you can improve, here's where your strengths and weaknesses are. And I can't say I'm going to do a perfect job, but my goal here is to try and accurately represent the things that jump out at me so that someone can make the improvements that might help their game along, or discard my advice if it's not useful to them. I don't have the inside baseball in the first place, so I can't know what kind of market research has been done, what kind of product knowledge there is, what kind of KPIs and goals and whatever else is going on that you might be informing your decisions based on. My goal is just to provide earnest information that can be used or discarded as appropriate to the product. And for those who are not developers, maybe they can get some value here out of learning how I break down a product to try and make it better. That way, if they're working on a project of their own, whatever it is, or if they're just curious how this stuff is done, they can get some value out of it. So I hope you all have enjoyed hanging out with me as much as I've enjoyed having you visit. Have a great day, and bye-bye.